For anybody that hasn't had a chance to hang out on MrHappy stream, he was working towards his Palace of the Dead clear, starting at floor 51, so you don't get the title, but he wasn't worried about the title because he already has the Master Troller title, and he worked really hard for that. And so he did eventually get his clear. I missed his clear. I was there right after the 198, I think, and then I stayed through the 196 wipe, and a little bit after that, and then I had to take off. So I have missed this. So I'm looking forward to him kind of talking about the remainder of the clear with kind of some commentary.
Hey everyone, MrHappy here, and I just wanted to do a quick little introduction for this video. Now, I recently managed to solo Palace of the Dead all the way to floor 200 on Machinist, and I wanted to post that Twitch content to YouTube, but I wanted to add a little something extra to it. So for this video, and for a couple of other videos on the channel, I want to provide some light commentary over moments where I feel like it's more fitting, not the entire time, just during select moments when maybe I could have made a better decision, or I can do a little bit more explaining of what's actually happening on the screen. For this video, I don't have too much of that to add, but I do plan on uploading floors 181 to 190 and the final stretch of 191 to 200. Plus, I want to do some thoughts videos about the actual design of Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High, and things I'd like to see them do in Endwalker to innovate on the system a little bit more. So with that, enjoy my floor 180 boss clear and the little bit of commentary that will be present throughout it, and hopefully you'll enjoy the other Palace of the Dead and Deep Dungeon videos we have coming this week. Special shout out, by the way, to the Palace of the Dead community, the Heaven on High community, the Deep Dungeon community as a whole, Angelus, Maggie, all the resources that are out there, all the people who come together on Twitch and YouTube to cheer each other on to get through this pretty intense challenge. So big shout outs to them, and if you're ever looking for resources, those are definitely some people that you're going to want to check out. Anyway, with that, let's get on to floor 180. Alright, so the big thing we have to remember is just the burst window at the end, and we should be good. This time, let me not almost sabotage myself, too.
So for anybody that doesn't know what Palace of the Dead is, Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High are the two entries in a system called Deep Dungeon. Deep Dungeon is our roguelike system, the closest parallel that Final Fantasy XIV has to Torghast, and they were released during the Heavensward and Stormblood expansions, respectively. Palace of the Dead has 200 floors, Heaven on High has 100 floors. You can complete them as large as a 4-man party, our standard dungeon size, a light party, and as small as a solo clear. The solo clear being some of the hardest single-player content available in-game by a pretty significant margin. There is a title for clearing from 1 all the way to the max of this, to 200. You can start at floor 51 if you made it that far in the past, so you save yourself a couple hours per attempt. But then you lose the risk at the Necromancer title, which a lot of people have been interested in, with Reaper coming this upcoming year. The Palace of the Dead interest has skyrocketed, especially as some noteworthy individuals have done it publicly, or at least attempted it publicly. There's been a lot of interest, but this community's always been there. There's an official leaderboard. You get points when you get the clear. The leaderboard's been there. It's put out by Square Enix. There are creators like Pharos that do this regularly on stream. There's a huge community that supports it with guides and, Discords and all of that. It is a massive piece of content. At the time, there was some weapons you could get from it that were relatively relevant. I don't remember where they fit within kind of the best in slot tiers, since I don't chase best in slot, but after that, they basically become cosmetic. Now, if you go in as a job, the job can be very low level relative to the content. So I don't remember what level. Palace of the Dead, it's like I don't know, it's really low, 15 or something. But for Heaven on High, you just need to be high enough to be in that content. And every time you finish a run, because you level really rapidly inside the run, you get experience when you come out. So it is a very common way to level alts. It is a very common way to kind of challenge yourself. It's a place you can go get lost in, just like running ultimates, which are purely cosmetic. It is a living, breathing piece of content, even though it's in an old expansion. And so from a gearing perspective, it's non-relevant. And from an experience perspective, while it is very good experience, the method to get the best experience out of it is basically running the same 10 floors over and over and over and over. So there are other less repetitive methods that are around as good. So I don't know that I would sit in Palace and say, okay, I'm going to do floors 51 to 60 for every single one of my jobs. I would try something else in there personally. But that's kind of an entry into what Palace of the Dead is. I have never cleared floor 200, and I have never cleared floor 100. I've been close to floor 100 in Heaven on High. I've never been as high as he is right now. Every 10 floors we get a boss, and then you get a chance to take a break so you can come back. You have multiple save files, kind of like an old school RPG. You have 2 save files per deep dungeon, and so you could always come back after you take a break after a boss. And so floor 180, then we have floor 190, and then we have the floor 200 boss, and in between you have trash floors that are very dangerous all on their own.
1 strength, 1 steel, and then get to the pole. I'm gonna poke my head in here for some commentary. Welcome to the floor 180 boss. It is a giant behemoth. It's very similar to the floor 80 boss, but its mechanics are just dialed up a little bit. And for the first 85%, it really only has 3 mechanics. The first one you just saw there, it was a conal AoE named Thunderbolt. Don't get hit by it. It's gonna kill pretty much any non-tank, and even as a tank, you don't want to get hit by it. The second, and probably the most major one, are these Charybdis tornadoes. You place these around the arena, and they pulse over and over again. If you stand too close to them, they'll pull you in and kill you. It's always safe to drop them on the east and west side of the arena, but you'll see me place it in other locations here in just a second. The third mechanic for the first 85% of the fight, the boss will walk either to the south side of the room, like it is now, or the north side of the room, and then we'll do this giant conal AoE trounce. If that hits you, it's not lethal, but it gives you a vuln stack, and that's just never good, whether you're doing this solo or in a party. You can also see I just decided to place these Charybdis tornadoes on either side of the boss here, because I won't have to worry about coming back to this side of the room for quite some time. If it goes to the south side of the room, then the next time it just decides to walk off, it'll go to the north side of the room, and then it'll go back and forth for the entire fight. If it goes to the south side of the room, it is also going to do this extra third Charybdis. You're going to see me place right there, and then the next thing will be the walk to the north, and then you're just going to repeat that for the first 85%.
Okay, so he's talking to the different bosses. Chad has told me there's not a floor 200 boss, so good to know. I will remind you that Heaven on High does require that you've cleared at least the first 50 floors of Palace of the Dead, and then one other thing to note is that you will notice at his experience bar that he's only level 60. These are bound to the experience cap and the level cap that was relevant at the time. So Palace of the Dead is capped at 60, Heaven on High is capped at 70. Blue Mage is not allowed in this style of content. And so there are kind of some restrictions as far as kind of how that goes. So when you're sinking down, when you're thinking about what jobs are good, you have to think about the jobs that are good based on the skills that are available to them at that level range. And so not every job retains its level 80 identity perfectly down to level 60. I mean, probably none of them do, but some feel drastically different at level 60 than they do at level 80.
Bob didn't do the trick. I would have had some slight concerns. Alright, poking my head in again because the boss's HP is starting to get a little bit low. And I mentioned the first 85% was just these 3 mechanics happening over and over again, but really the fight, you make or break it in the last 15%. When the boss gets below 15% HP, it begins spamming Ecliptic Meteor. This is an unavoidable attack that deals 80% of your max HP in damage, meaning if you ever have less than 80% of your max HP, you just die. Simple as that. Now, different jobs and different roles have different ways of dealing with this. Tanks can invuln the meteor, for example, and healers can just power through. But on Machinist, I don't have a lot of options, to say the least, so I need to kill the boss as quickly as possible when it gets to 15%. Every job and every role also has a setup phase where they're basically trying to get the boss prepared to burst it down as quickly as they possibly can. So I'm going to be doing that for Machinist here, but there are strategies out there for every single job or role. You just need to do a quick Google search. And again, shout out to the Deep Dungeon community for coming up with all those different strategies, because it's awesome that there is one for pretty much every different job. So I'm going to go quiet again until we get closer to the prep phase.
And so the 2 accepted jobs, the kind of meta, are to attempt this with Machinist or with Red Mage. Being ranged has a lot of advantages as you progress through the floors. Faro says that Ninja's pretty good as well, and then on the Heaven on High side, he brags a lot on tanks, but the Machinist and the Red Mage are kind of the 2 most commonly first attempted ones. Red Mage, obviously, with its Vercure being very, very good at healing, but Machinist having a nice ranged burst seems to be pretty good at this. I don't really know how those are the ones that got decided. I know that as a result of those kind of being the meta and being what a lot of people attempt and being the kind of accepted easiest ones. That also makes those leaderboards very, very, very competitive because there's a ton of machinist solo clears. So every single job can clear this, but some are going to be a lot more technical than others. Obviously, the ability to stand at range and kind of stay at range is going to help with a lot of these things that hit really hard on the floors. So ranged is a very preferred way to do it. If you could somehow have health and healing and damage, that's kind of your ideal scenario. So as you think through the jobs, any one of those that are missing is something you're going to have to adjust for.
Alright, normally I like to get set up right here. After Charybdis number 3, I'll get set up right here. I'll wait till after the 3rd Charybdis. Alright, so around 20 to 21%, you really need to start controlling how much damage you have. At this point, you should have all your gauges saved up. You can see I have 100 battery and 100 heat. So I'm ready to go for that big burst that I need in the last 15%. But first we need to prepare the boss, and the one main way you do this is with a Pomander of Lust. This allows you to transform into a succubus, and then you can...
So let's stop real quick and talk about what Pomanders are. So when you talk about Torghast over in World of Warcraft is basically effectively a deck building game. And so as you're clearing the different floors, you're getting choices between a series of cards. For any of you that have ever done a Magic the Gathering draft style tournament or anything like that, where a pack comes around the table, you look at the pack, you take out the card you want, you pass the pack on. That's effectively what's happening in Torghast, is you're coming up on these moments where you're given a choice of things that modify your character in some way and make your character more powerful, and you take those choices and you kind of build out a version of your character, and it can, and many times it can change your rotation, change the way you play, and change the very texture of how your class feels as you progress through the floors in Torghast. Deep Dungeon is a little bit different. So what we're doing is, as we go through the floors, we are collecting Pomanders. Pomanders are consumable items that all do various things that modify your character either for the duration of a floor or very briefly, modify the enemies, remove negative effects. And so each of these Pomanders do different things. When we move into Heaven on High, we add Magicite on top, which allows you to kind of have these big Final Fantasy-esque summons. And so you can go out and Google my reaction to getting an Odin on day 1 release of Heaven on High. Had no idea what it would do, and it's out there somewhere as a clip, because the Odin moment is so, it's an unbelievably kind of, I don't see that many of those Magicites, and it's unbelievably powerful what it does.
You can spam a fire spell on the behemoth that does some damage but also gives it vulnerability up. You can stack this up to 5 times, and you're definitely going to need to be doing this. I like to do it right before the boss goes to cast this Trounce, because it just gives me enough time to get the 5 out without having to worry too much about healing. As soon as the 5th one goes out, I untransform. I make sure to get my health up because the boss has been autoing me this entire time. And now I just need to inch the boss's HP closer and closer to 15%. And this can be done with your weakest skills, with your auto attacks, but there's also a macro you can use. I'll put it on the screen right here, and if you spam that, it'll give you the exact HP percentage of the boss to let you know, okay, I need to stop attacking now. There are also things that you can use like ACT, which will give you the exact number and percentage as well, but just get it as close to 15% without going under, and you'll be okay. Now, after that, I need to make sure my HP is over 80% to begin with, because if I can't survive the first meteor, I'm done. Soon as this first Charybdis casts, I use my pot, I use my reassemble, I throw down the bot, and then it's go to town. At this point, it's just machinist burst. I hit him with the drill, I hit him with the wildfire, the hypercharge, the heat blast, the OGCDs in between. After that, we got a hot shot, then we got another hypercharge, we got those OGCDs in between, and if I really needed it, I have a drill at the end, and that's it. You gotta kill the boss in that time, and this is the tincture strat for machinist. There's another strat where you can survive the second meteor. I decided not to go with that because that gives me way more anxiety, and this one worked really well for me. So there are tons of strategies out there for all the different jobs, so regardless of which role or job you're trying to do this with, there's something out there for you. But that's how you do it on Machinist, and it was a blast. Now, this isn't the only time I beat the Behemoth. In fact, it wasn't even the cleanest time I beat the Behemoth, but this is the one that was on the run where we cleared the floor 200. So I'm going to just play out the rest of my little commentary at the end because it's a little bit funny because I'm just trying to lower my anxiety after all that. And then I'll be sure to get some commentary on 181 to 190 for you guys. So thank you again for watching. Enjoy the rest of the video. And until next time, take care.
Now keep in mind that as he saw those Palmanders, the reason you wouldn't burn all of these is some of them don't affect bosses, some of them don't have a use here, but they are also something you build over a run. When you die, that's it. In a solo run, there's nobody to res you, there's none of that, like, it's just done. So when you die, you know, outside, unless you have a Palmander or something that modifies that somehow, your run is over, and you have to start over, either at floor 51 or at floor 1 if you want to have a chance at the Necromancer title. And so these can be 7-hour runs that you don't have to do all in one sitting, but that is the total run time. And if you make a mistake on any of these floors, on the bosses, that's it. That's the end of the run. And so you are building up Palmanders over the course of that run. When it dies, that whole inventory goes and you start over. There is a gear type system that's tied to it, but all these people that are attempting this are at max whatever it's called, Aether Pool, or whatever the name for the gear is in there. So that's already maxed. They've left that there. You pull from that, I think, to get the weapons and stuff when you buy the weapons. So when you're still acquiring gear, that kind of moves around. But otherwise, it spends most of its time, just like in any MMO, spends most of its time at cap. So thanks for sharing Floor 180. Congrats on your clear. Absolutely amazing. It is still a relatively rare thing to do to even see floor 200, even in a 4-man starting at floor 51. It's still a relatively rare thing to have achieved. So it is up there. So when people are getting to the end of MSQ and wondering what the most challenging things they can do are, and their first thought is, well, maybe I'll go do dungeons. Dungeons are not it. You're looking at extremes, savages, ultimates, Palace of the Dead, and Heaven on High. Those are the majority of kind of the difficult things that are not tied behind a big relic grind where we start to talk about Baldesian Arsenal and Delimrim Savage. Like, there are things in this game that are very challenging. What makes them challenging really varies, but what makes Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High something that most of us don't even take the time to attempt is that if you make a mistake, you start over. So it is playing very well, very consistently for a very long amount of time.